In this video, we're going to look at a few different problems involving factoring using the AC method. An important distinction here is that all of these have a equals to 1, meaning in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, the number in front of x squared, which is this a right here, is always 1. Well, it's not always 1, but it is for these 4 problems. So we're going to use a shortcut in this video that if you use when a is something else other than 1, it won't work. So if there was like a 3 or 4 in front of x squared, you have to use a longer factoring method. So the first thing you recognize in these problems is, well, we look for a greatest common factor and there is not one. So there's no factor that divides all 3 terms. So we say there's 3 terms. Let's use the AC method because it looks like it is in quadratic form. And so we take a times c, which a is 1, and c is negative 14. It's the constant. And we get negative 14. And we're looking for 2 numbers that add to multiply to negative 14 and add to negative 5. And this is just a guess and check time for you. These numbers are negative 7 and positive 2. Now, because a is equal to 1, we can take the shortcut and right away write this as 2 binomials, which is just 2 sets of parentheses. And then each parenthesis has 2 things in them, by meaning 2. So we have x minus 7 and then x plus 2. And this is the factored form. Nothing else does factor, which you'll check on later as you get further into factoring. But this is done. An important thing with factoring is if I were to multiply, distribute, or FOIL, however you want to think about these 2 parentheses, I get back to where I started. So when we factor, we're writing things just in a different form, but we're not changing the value. Let's move to the one on the right here. If I have x squared, get rid of this 1. If we have x squared plus 7x plus 12, there's not a greatest common factor, that's something that they can all divide by. So I do a times c to get 12. I need 2 numbers that add to 7 and multiply to 12. Those numbers are 4 and 3. And once again, only because a is 1, I can take this shortcut and just say, well, that's x plus 4 times x plus 3. And so this expression is the same as the expression we started with. Just a different way to write it. Now it is multiplication. Excuse me, let's go down to the one on the bottom left here. We have x squared minus 9x minus 36. So a times c is negative 36 and multiply to negative 9. And guess and check, try some different numbers. But if I have negative 12 and 3, those numbers multiply to negative 36 and add to negative 9. Now, a couple of shortcuts and things you can think of. If this number is negative, remember one of these has to be positive and one negative. And you can kind of just think of subtraction or the difference. And then the bigger number gets the negative sign if this is negative down here. So then we take our shortcut, and it's x minus 12 times x plus 3. And that is completely factored. There's nothing else we can do to that one. And then this last one, if I do a times c, I get 15, and this multiplies, or they have to add to negative 2. So we can try some different numbers, but like if you try 5 and 3, well, those multiply to 15, but they don't add to negative 2. And the problem is if I put a negative here and say, well, it might get negative 5, but now that would be negative 15. So there aren't any numbers I can fill this pattern with. And when that happens, we just say this does not factor, or you can say that the trinomial is prime. Factoring is a key skill to be successful in algebra, in all your algebra classes, so be sure to practice.